Hey guys, it's Joshua Klein, your host of the Draft Beard podcast. I'd like to welcome you in tonight as we're going to be discussing a recap of the NFC North. Tonight we're going to go over all four teams in the NFC North and recap their drafts. We're going to get started with the Green Bay Packers. I have them rated as my least favorite draft in the NFC North, and then we'll get right over to the Minnesota Vikings, the Detroit Lions, and the Chicago Bears. So those are in order of my favorite drafts in the NFC North. So it gets going right here at the Green Bay Packers. The Green Bay Packers started out their draft drafting Jordan Morgan at number 25 overall of the Arizona Wildcats. He's more of a guard, in my opinion. It's probably where I think his position will be best. The Packers look like they feel a little differently, which is probably why they passed on Graham Barton. Graham Barton had a top 10 grade for me in this year's draft. He can play all along the offensive line, guard, center. And I think he can play tackle. They didn't take him. They didn't move up maybe to get a corner. That's kind of what I thought maybe they were trying to do there. But with better players on the board and Jordan Morgan being more in the 40 to 45 range on my big board, not a big fan of the pick. I thought they could have got better value. But in their defense, I think what they're looking for is they're looking for the tackle to solidify that position. He is athletic, kind of does fit that Green Bay Packers mold. In the second round, they followed it up with Edgerrin Cooper, the linebacker out of Texas A&M. I think he's going to do well, putting him in that outside set, getting him to blitz off the edge where he's special. He's a really good, fast, smart football player. I think they get a starting linebacker there in the second round. They get a good, just eats, sleeps, and drinks football in Javon Bullard out of the University of Georgia. I like him. I like that pick a lot. And then Marshawn Lloyd, that running back out of USC. I think he's going to come in, be your number 2 running back right now. He can be there, take over for Jacobs. He might even supplant Jacobs in a year or two. I really like him as a football player. For now, he's a good complement to Josh Jacobs. So I think their first 4 picks there are pretty good. I don't think any of them are home runs. And then you get into the typical Green Bay Packers style of draft as you get into rounds. A second, third round pick, a fourth round pick, fifth round pick. They pick Tyron Hopper, linebacker out of Missouri. Nice player. Evan Williams, safety out of Oregon, and Jacob Monk, the center out of Duke. I didn't have any of those players in my top 175. Hopper has an ability to be a good special teams player. I don't necessarily see him developing into a starting linebacker. You just already drafted Edgerrin Cooper just 2 rounds before. Evan Williams, Monk, again, more late round positional value. I did like Oladipo out of Oregon State. I actually had him rated ahead of Evan Williams, who they drafted at pick 111. Oladipo they picked at 169. And then we get into the 6th and 7th round. They actually did some pretty good job here. Travis Glover out of Georgia State's a good developmental tackle. And then why not throw a dart on Michael Pratt? I'm really surprised that he fell that far. I really thought a team would take him early day 4, but stash a quarterback. Green Bay is notorious for doing this and doing it very well. They've had great success over the last 2 to 3 decades of drafting developmental quarterbacks and doing a good job at developing them and then trading them off for bigger and better assets. And so I like that. Kalen King, I just did not like him at all. I didn't even have him as a draftable player. He just fell throughout the 2023 season. So they take a flyer on him. Maybe he can start to redeem himself. He did have some good tape at Penn State previously, but just did not like him at all throughout the draft process and just didn't even have him again on my draft board. So that's the overview of the Green Bay Packers. I think they look like they maybe get a starting guard / tackle, good starting linebacker, starting safety. So they get 2 to 3 good starters out of this draft and a backup running back right away, and then some developmental guys at the end. So that's my take on the Green Bay Packers. Next up, we'll move up to the Minnesota Vikings. The other 3 teams in this division just had really decent drafts. Not that the Packers had a terrible draft. They didn't by any means. They just didn't have it at the upper echelon that the Minnesota Vikings, the Lions, and the Bears had. So the Vikings, they did a good job getting their quarterback to replace the outgoing Kirk Cousins. They get J.J. McCarthy, who they were kind of rumored to be going after for a while now. They traded into the first round, about a month and a half ago, get that extra first-round pick. They didn't have to use it to go get their quarterback. That is mad props to their general manager. Great job not having to use those assets. However, you didn't use the premier asset. You did use some assets in this draft to move up one spot to secure J.J. McCarthy with the Jets, afraid maybe the Broncos or Raiders are going to try to jump up and get him. And Dallas Turner, because of all those offensive players being drafted in the first 14 picks, that goes pushing defensive players down. Minnesota makes the move to kind of bolster their pass rush after losing Danielle Hunter. Dallas Turner was third edge rusher on my board, but a huge gap between my number 3 and my number grade difference between the number 3 edge rusher and the number 4. So Minnesota makes the jump. They use a lot of draft capital to get those first 2 players. They kind of go with the Houston Texans model from last year, get their quarterback, get their edge rusher. Next year, they're going to be in a little bit of a pickle if they don't get any compensation picks for the losses of their free agents. So as of right now, just a first-round pick, and their next pick is until the 5th round. Do expect them to get some sort of compensation picks, whether that's 3rd or 4th rounders. So at this moment, it looks worse than what it is. But I did like what the Vikings did, or at least the concept of it, getting McCarthy, getting Turner. I like J.J. McCarthy. I had him as my 2nd-rated quarterback. Now, I had him bunched, right? If you go back and watch my draft rankings, I had McCarthy, Daniels, May, kind of all bunched in together. So it's like kind of pick your poison. I like the lower floor of J.J. McCarthy. And then they didn't have a pick till round 4. They got Kyrie Jackson, cornerback out of Oregon. Another player with good size, good length, and good speed. I think he could do really well in the Minnesota defense. And then around 6, a developmental tackle in Walter Rouse. I think he can be a swing tackle that you get in around 6. Made the jump to try to get a kicker. Kickers are, kind of whatever in the draft. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. But not really a big fan of drafting a kicker in the draft. Just take your shot. Maybe an undrafted free agent. But it's not something I'm really going to nitpick on. And then Michael Jurgens and Levi Drake Rodriguez were your last 2 picks in the 7th round. Didn't really know much about Rodriguez out of Texas A&M Commerce, but overall, I think they did very well. They got top-tier talent at the front, kind of sandwiching through in there Kyrie Jackson, who I had a 3rd, 4th round grade on, so he kind of fit right there at the positional value. But a decent draft haul for the Vikings. This is going to all be sink or swim. If McCarthy and Turner pan out, this is a great job. If not, then this is kind of down the road. You're either looking for a new general manager, or guess what? You got to reinvest again in that quarterback. So next up, we're going to go with the Detroit Lions. The Lions didn't have a big haul this year in draft picks. They moved around a lot. They actually ended up trading away some assets, and they also, remember, they traded away a 3rd round pick to get Davis, the cornerback out of Tampa Bay, earlier in the offseason. So they didn't come away with a lot of picks. They only came away with 5 total players in the draft. And in the 1st round, they again took advantage of all the offense in the first part of the 1st round. They were able to trade up, use the 3rd round pick, 73 overall, to pick up Terry and Arnold. I like Arnold. He was my 3rd-rated corner. Like, if you Cooper DeJean, more of a safety or kind of a jack-of-all-trades guy, I think sure you could say that Arnold was the number 2 corner. But he was number 3 on my board. One of the 3 first-round graded cornerbacks that I had first-round grades on this year. He's going to be a great player for the Detroit Lions. Really like that pick. He has all the attributes that you want in a cornerback. Maybe not as top high-end speed as you really, really want in a corner, but he's a dog. He's going to give it everything he has. He's able to follow receivers. He's going to be a good boundary corner in the NFL. I really like Terry and Arnold. That was a nice move by Brad Holmes. I don't like giving up assets, especially when you have a guy who can draft as well as Detroit Lions general manager Brad Holmes. But they go and they get their guy. He has shown over the years to be able to manipulate the draft board very well. Next up, he gets Ennis Rakestraw Jr. I like Ennis Rakestraw. Again, he's not the super high-end athlete that you want at the position. He kind of is like a poor man's Devin Weatherspoon and kind of how he plays. He's a great tackler, which I highly desire, and so does Aaron Glenn. Out of my cornerbacks, if you can't tackle, then you're not going to fit in that defensive scheme. You got to be a willing tackler. Even better if you're really good at it. I like him a lot. I think he's going to need a little bit more develop. He gets a little handsy. The illegal contact issues might be a problem. Well, that will be a problem if he doesn't kind of get that worked out of his game. So I think getting him where he doesn't have to come in and play right away is a good thing. He's going to get some snaps, but he doesn't have to come in and be a starter. But he's going to be eventually a starter that gets you 2 boundary outside corners that you're gonna have maybe this year, but definitely as we go forward into the 2025 season. And then it kind of puzzling in round 4, they pick up Giovanni Manu. I knew of him. I don't know a lot about him. He's from the University of British Columbia in Canada. He is 6'7", 6'8", over 350 pounds. He is a former basketball player. He is athletic. I believe he only played football the last 2 years at high school. He's more of a basketball player. He is a work in progress. But when you see him and you look at him, he is 350 pounds, but he has no gut. He is fit. He is athletic. He is going to be a person that's going to take up a roster spot, but I don't really see him seeing the field much like the Lions did last year with Broderick Martin on the defensive side. So he's going to be at least a full season and probably into the second season before you start to see him. I did hear that they may kind of play him at right guard just to kind of get his feet acclimated. But he's a project. These types of players don't grow on trees. Trading a third-round pick for next year to gain a fourth-round pick this year from the New York Jets. His track record, though, over the last 3 years, I can cut him some slack. Right now, I just sit back and go, hey, I'll tip your cap. But it's a risk that you're going to take to try to see if this mammoth of a man can develop into a starting or even a better than a starter offensive tackle. And then they pick up Sione Vaki. Actually makes it 6 picks. Sorry, they have 6 picks this year. But Sione was another fourth-round pick. They moved up some assets. They basically traded the Eagles back their pick that they gave Detroit before the start of last season to pick up DeAndre Swift. Sione is an interesting player. Is he going to play safety? Is he going to play running back? He was more of a safety in college, but the Lions may view him as a running back, so he might be a guy who can play both positions. I see him more as competing for that third running back spot in Detroit. They may carry him on the roster, list him as the fourth running back. He's going to be a guy that you can use on punt coverage, or you can use him as the punt returner, kick returner, especially with the new kickoff rules. Interesting player. He's just an all-around football player, great stamina. He's a great athlete. I don't see him as like a starter at any one position, but he's going to be a quality special teamer. And then in the 6th round, the Lions absolutely get some steals on the board. I wasn't as high on Mickey Wingo out of LSU, the defensive tackle. He's kind of a pass rushing specialist defensive tackle. The other people did have him in the top 100. I didn't. I think it's a really good pickup in the 6th round. And then my favorite pick maybe of the entire draft, I loved Christian Mahogany. He was one of my 4 guys in the interior offensive line that I would pound the table for. He is mean. He is an excellent run blocker. He gets on you, and he's going to create a hole. So the running backs in Detroit are absolutely going to love him. Now, he has some inconsistent issues. He has some issues in pass protection. He doesn't fit a lot of schemes in the NFL. If you're more of a zone scheme, which the majority of NFL teams do run more zone than what the Lions run. So there aren't as many teams that run the system that Christian's going to benefit from. So the Lions are one of them. I think there maybe was some medical, but I was absolutely stunned that he dropped to the 6th round. I usually don't jump out of my chair when my team picks a 6th round player. But man, I was so excited to see Brad Holmes grab him. He is a guy who can come in probably next year and start if Kevin Zeitler leaves, or if Graham Glasgow leaves, or he moves positions because Ragnar retires. So it gives you a guy that you can sit for a year, work with Hank Fraley, their offensive line coach, and develop him into a starting guard for the Detroit Lions next year. So that's my overall pick. They got absolute steal in Terrion Arnold, and then the questionable pick with Manu. Really good draft by the Lions. I don't give draft grades, but it definitely is up there in my top 5 drafts of the entire NFL. And then you got the Chicago Bears. Again, they didn't have a lot of picks either. They had 5 picks in this year's draft. But when you can get 3 of the top 5 players in this draft, and that's how I view Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, that is an absolute home run. The trade they worked out last year at the Carolina Panthers has been a possible franchising-altering moment for the Chicago Bears. So Chicago fans, I know they're ecstatic. They are ready for this season to get going. Hopefully a franchise-changing quarterback for them. For me, not so much. I'm a Lions fan, so I hope Caleb Williams doesn't work out. But hey, I'm selfish. I don't necessarily anticipate that to happen, but man, you pair him up with Rome Odunze, what they've already done in the offseason with getting Keenan Allen. Their receiving core is absolutely loaded. Fantastic draft. I don't know how you could say really too much negative about getting 2 absolute top-tier studs. I actually loved Rome. I had him as my number 2 receiver, and I strongly considered putting him as my number 1 receiver over Marvin Harrison. I think those 3 receivers this year, the top 3 receivers this year's draft, are just absolute all-pro potential wide receivers. Love Rome. And then they drafted Kirian Amagaji, maybe a little bit higher than what I would like, but when people started seeing him mocked in like late 1st, early 2nd, early in the mock draft process through the draft season, I thought they were crazy. He needs a lot of work, a lot of development, but that's like what the Lions did with Manu. This is what you do. You draft him in the mid rounds. You hope you can develop these athletic freaks, which don't grow on trees. So that was a good job by the Chicago Bears picking him up, even though I could nitpick with how early it was. Picking up the best punter in the draft in the 4th round, okay. I see it. Taylor is actually probably Iowa's best player. That's not saying much for the University of Iowa and what their offense is like this year. But he could be a guy who could lock down that punting situation and be a field flipper for the next 10 to 15 years for the Bears. And then picking up Austin Booker in the 5th round, probably where he should definitely have gotten drafted. And a lot of people were really high on him. Some people had him in that 3rd round area. I think he should have went back to college. He's very raw, but this is a guy that you take, if you can get him in the 5th round and develop him, it could be a steal for you. So overall, a really good draft by the Chicago Bears. I think the Bears and the Lions had top 5 drafts this year. The Vikings were right in the top 15. The Packers in the bottom, around 20, somewhere in the 25, 24, 23 range in my overall rankings. So that is a recap of the NFC North, which I think in the next few years is going to be the best division in football. It's going to be a bloodbath. I think everybody has improved themselves. So if McCarthy works out, if Williams works out, and you have Goff and Love continues to do what he did last year, and the improvement the Packers made, this is going to be a very fun division to watch. Every Sunday it's going to be a war. So that is my recap of the NFC North. Hope you enjoyed this. We'll be back again to recap another division here in the NFL draft over the next few weeks. So with that, have a great night and enjoy your evening.
The Draft Beard Podcast.